At Thanksgiving, my brother said, "You can keep the old house. We'll take the lake cabin, it's nicer." Mom smiled. "That's only fair since he has a family." The whole room laughed. 2 days later, my mom called in a panic. "Why is the lawyer streaming the will reading?" I need to tell you about the Thanksgiving that absolutely shattered my perception of my family. I thought I knew these people, that we were just normal, you know? But what started as a casual joke at dinner spiraled into a full-blown betrayal that forced me to fight for my place, not just in their lives, but in my own. My name's Tim, I'm 33, and up until last Thanksgiving, I really thought I had a pretty good handle on my family's quirks. We weren't the huggy-kissy type or big on I love yous, but we were functional. We did the usual holiday dinners, swapped gifts, and had polite small talk about work and life updates. I'm the youngest of three. My brother Evan is 38, married with 2 kids, and my sister Lisa, 36, is living her best Instagram influencer life. I was always the quiet one, the kid who'd rather get lost in a book or a side project than jump into a shouting match at the dinner table. Maybe that's why everyone always underestimated me. The one they thought wouldn't push back. This particular Thanksgiving was supposed to be just like any other. I'd flown back to town, brought a nice bottle of wine, even made my mom's favorite dessert from scratch. I was ready for a peaceful evening. We all sat down around the long oak table, that same one that's been in our family for decades, and for a while, everything was going fine. Until Evan leaned back in his chair, a smug smirk spreading across his face, and said, "You can keep the old house. We'll take the lake cabin. It's prettier." I blinked, genuinely not sure I'd heard him right. The old house. The cabin? He said it like we were just dividing up a set of old dishes, not our family's 2 most valuable properties. The room went quiet for a split second, then Mom chuckled, a patronizing sound that immediately put me on edge. "Well, it's only fair since he has a family," she said, looking at me with that head tilt that always meant you wouldn't understand. The entire table erupted in laughter like she'd just dropped the funniest joke of the year. Even Lisa was giggling, phone in hand, probably already crafting some snarky Instagram caption about our family drama. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Something inside me just sank. Not just because of what they said, but because of how utterly casual it was, like this was already decided. Like they'd had this conversation a dozen times without me, and now they were just finally letting me in on the joke. I tried to play it cool. I asked, as evenly as I could, "Wait, what do you mean?" "Keep the old house." Evan shrugged, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You know Mom and Dad's will, right? It just makes sense that I get the cabin. We have kids. They love it up there. You can have the old place." I glanced at my parents. Dad didn't even look up from carving the turkey. Mom just smiled, that familiar smile that always meant, "Don't argue." My stomach churned. For the rest of dinner, I barely spoke. I just kept replaying Evan's words in my head. The cabin wasn't just the cabin, you know? It was where Dad taught me to fish, where I'd spent summers fixing up the dock with my grandfather, where I'd taken my first girlfriend. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was a piece of our history. After dessert, I stayed behind to help clear the table. I thought maybe I'd get a private moment with Mom or Dad to clarify things. Instead, I overheard them talking to Evan in the kitchen. Mom said, "I'm glad we settled that. It's only right that you get the cabin. Tim will be fine with the house." Evan replied, "Yeah, and honestly, I don't think he even likes going up there. It's better this way." I had to bite my tongue so hard it hurt. They hadn't just assumed I didn't care. They'd convinced themselves I didn't deserve it. I went home that night with a pit in my stomach that just wouldn't go away. I lay awake until 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, thinking about every single time I'd driven up to the cabin alone to fix the roof, mow the lawn, or shovel snow out of the driveway so Mom and Dad could have their peaceful weekend. I'd spend hours doing upkeep while Evan stayed in the city and Lisa posted vacation selfies. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice was tight. Panicked. "Tim, why is the lawyer streaming the will reading?" I sat there silent for a beat, my heart pounding. Because here's the thing, I hadn't said a word to anyone yet, but I'd already made a call of my own. When Mom called me in that panicked tone, I almost let it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the better of me. Streaming? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Yes, she snapped, her words coming out rapid fire. Your father just got an email from the lawyer's office saying the will reading will be live-streamed for all named beneficiaries. We didn't agree to that. You know how private we are about these things. Did you do something? I stayed silent for a moment, just long enough for her to fill the gap with nervous chatter. Your father is furious, Tim. You know this is a family matter. We can't have other people listening in. Why would the lawyer? Maybe, I interrupted. He thought it was important that everyone be on the same page. Transparent. Her sharp inhale on the other end of the line told me everything. Mom hated when things got taken out of the family's control. She liked quiet decisions, closed doors, whispered plans in the kitchen while the rest of us sat in the living room. Transparency wasn't part of the family brand. We'll talk about this later, she said finally, her voice clipped. Don't do anything reckless. But that was the thing. I hadn't done anything reckless yet. Not really. Later that day, I went over to my parents' house to return a casserole dish I'd borrowed from Thanksgiving. When I walked in, the mood was absolutely icy. Dad didn't even greet me. He just sat in his chair, staring at the news like it had personally offended him. Mom crossed her arms and launched right in. We heard from the lawyer, she said. We told him to cancel whatever nonsense he's doing online. This is a private family matter. I leaned against the doorway and raised an eyebrow. Private, like how you decided who gets what without even asking me? That set Dad off. He turned in his chair and pointed the carving knife he was still holding at me, like I was the turkey this time. Watch your tone. Your brother has responsibilities. A wife, children. The cabin is better for him. You're single. You don't even use it half the time. My jaw clenched. That's because I'm the one maintaining it so you guys can use it. Do you think those dock repairs just happen on their own? Dad waved a dismissive hand. You're overreacting. It's not about repairs. It's about family. Evan needs the space. You'll have your house. What more do you want? I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake them and ask how many more years of being the reliable one I had to put in before they'd stop treating me like the background character in my own life. Instead, I just said, I guess it's good that the will reading is coming up. Then we'll all know where we stand. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. Don't make this harder than it has to. Tim. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. The next week was a blur of small slights that added up like paper cuts. Evan posted a photo on Facebook of his kids playing in the snow at the cabin, captioned, "Making memories at our place." Lisa commented under it, "Love that you guys finally claimed it." Mom and Dad both liked the post. I didn't say anything publicly, but when I saw it, my stomach twisted so hard I had to put my phone down. Our place, like I'd already been erased from it. A couple of days later, Lisa called me out of the blue. Hey, she said, her voice overly casual. I just wanted to give you a heads up that Mom's been a little stressed about the will thing. Maybe just tell the lawyer to stop making a big deal about it. Evan said it's not worth causing drama over. I laughed bitterly. Of course, he said that. He's getting exactly what he wants. Lisa sighed. Tim, don't be like this. You know he has the kids. You can visit the cabin whenever you want. No one's trying to cut you out. That's exactly what you're doing. I shot back. You're all deciding what's best for me without me even being in the room. She went quiet for a moment, then said, You've always been so dramatic. This isn't about you. It's about what's best for the family. And there it was. The phrase that always ended the conversation. What's best for the family? Translation. Sit down and take it, Tim. Don't make waves. That night, I found myself driving out to the cabin, partly because I needed space, partly because I needed to remind myself why I cared so much. Snow had started to fall by the time I pulled up. The driveway hadn't been shoveled since the last storm, so I trudged through the knee-deep snow to the porch. Inside, everything smelled the same: cedarwood, pine cleaner, a faint trace of my grandfather's old pipe tobacco that still seemed to cling to the wood. I walked from room to room, running my hands over the old furniture, the photos on the wall, the patch in the corner of the living room where I'd accidentally burned the carpet with a sparkler when I was 12. I stood at the window and looked out at the frozen lake. And for the first time in years, I felt something sharp. Not just hurt, but anger. Not the kind that fades after a night of sleep, but the kind that simmers until it boils over. When I got back into town the next morning, I stopped by the lawyer's office. Not to cause trouble, not yet, but to ask questions. And what he told me made my blood run cold. Apparently, my parents had been in last month to make adjustments to their estate plan. Adjustments that, according to the lawyer, streamlined things by naming Evan as primary beneficiary of the cabin. The old will had been divided evenly between the three of us. But this new version, it left me with just the house, Lisa with a trust fund payout, and Evan with the cabin, plus most of the liquid assets. "Did you sign off on this?" the lawyer asked. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. No one even told me about it. He frowned. "That's unusual. They said you were aware." I thanked him and left, my head spinning. The drive home was a blur. My phone buzzed twice with texts from Evan. One, a photo of him by the fireplace at the cabin with the caption, "Home sweet home." And the other, just 3 words, "You good, bro?" I didn't answer because in that moment, I knew I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was done. And if they wanted to turn this into a game of control, they were about to find out I'd been playing a much longer game than they ever imagined. I didn't answer Evan's text. In fact, I turned my phone face down and spent the rest of that night pacing around my apartment like a caged animal. My mind was buzzing with everything I'd just learned. The quiet trip to the lawyer, the secret changes to the will, the smug look Evan had worn when he told me I could keep the old house. I barely slept. By morning, I had made myself a promise. I wasn't going to be blindsided again. If my family wanted to treat me like an afterthought, then I was done playing along with their little charade of family unity. A few days later, the betrayal hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I was at work when my phone lit up with a notification from Facebook. Evan had tagged me in a post. Curious, I clicked and nearly dropped my phone. It was a photo of Evan and his wife holding a set of keys in front of the cabin with a caption that read, "Officially ours." So grateful to Mom and Dad for making this happen. Can't wait to build more memories here with the kids. Hundreds of likes and congratulations flooded the comments. Friends, neighbors, even extended family members were posting heart emojis and "so happy for you guys." Meanwhile, my name sat tagged at the bottom of the post, like I'd been invited to witness my own public humiliation. I texted him immediately. "Me? What is this, Evan?" "Evan, what do you mean?" "Thought you'd be happy we finally made it official." "Me? Official as in legal?" "Evan, yeah. Mom and Dad went ahead and signed the transfer last week. We've got the deed in hand. Don't worry, you'll still get the house when the time comes." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. They hadn't even waited for the will reading. They had already transferred the cabin to Evan. By the time I drove over to my parents' house that evening, I was vibrating with anger. Mom answered the door like nothing was wrong, smiling as if we were about to sit down for tea. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. She frowned. "Tell you what?" "That you already signed over the cabin to Evan." Her face tightened. "Tim, lower your voice. This isn't the place for dramatics." "Are you kidding me?" I could feel my voice rising despite myself. "You went behind my back, changed the will, and signed over the property, and you didn't think I deserved to know?" Dad appeared in the hallway, clearly annoyed. "We didn't go behind your back. This was a family decision. You don't have kids. You don't need the cabin the way Evan does." I took a step forward. "So, my entire childhood? All those summers? The hours spent fixing that place up? All those weekends I gave up to make sure it stayed livable? That doesn't count for anything? You just decided I didn't matter." Mom tried to put a hand on my arm, but I stepped back. "Tim, you're overreacting. This was always the plan. We just made it official." "No," I said, my throat tight. "It was your plan, not mine. You never asked me what I wanted." Evan and his wife chose that exact moment to walk in, laughing about something on their phone. When they saw me, Evan raised an eyebrow. "Whoa, is this about the cabin? You still mad about that?" The way he said mad, like it was some childish tantrum, made my blood boil. "This isn't about being mad," I said through gritted teeth. "This is about respect. You all decided I didn't deserve to be part of the conversation. Evan shrugged, unbothered. Look, man, you get the house. That's worth more than the cabin anyway. I don't see the problem. The problem, I snapped, is that you think money is the same as meaning. That cabin was the one place that actually felt like home. But sure, go ahead. Post more pictures. Play house. Pretend you earned it. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Driving home, I felt hollow. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was a line being drawn in permanent ink. My parents had made their choice. Evan had made his. And apparently, I was the expendable one. That night, Lisa called me. She must have heard about the blow-up because her voice was low, almost apologetic. Hey, she said. I know you're upset, but maybe you should just let this go. Mom's been crying. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. It's just not worth the stress. I laughed bitterly. Not worth the stress for who? For them? They get to pat themselves on the back and sleep peacefully while I sit here knowing I was written out of my own family's history. Lisa hesitated. It's just, you're the strong one, Tim. You've always been the one who could handle disappointment. Something inside me cracked at that. Yeah, I said quietly. Maybe that's the problem. For the next week, I barely spoke to anyone. I went to work, came home, and sat in silence. But the silence didn't hurt. It sharpened me. I started thinking more clearly. The will reading was still scheduled for the following week. And while they had already transferred the cabin, there were still other assets, other accounts, other decisions that would be finalized. And if they wanted to treat this like a game, then maybe it was time for me to play too on my own terms. The night after that confrontation, I sat in my apartment in complete silence. No TV, no music, just me and the low hum of the refrigerator. I don't think I'd ever felt so completely erased. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I kept replaying that moment when Evan and his wife walked in, laughing, keys to the cabin in hand, like they'd just closed on a vacation rental. The image made my stomach twist. I'd always known my brother had a smug streak, but this felt different, like he was reveling in the fact that I'd been cut out. Over the next few days, I tried to throw myself into work, but even that felt empty. My boss noticed. At one point, she gently asked if everything was okay, and I nearly laughed because how could I explain that my family had just taken the one place that mattered most to me and handed it over like it was a wedding favor? I started skipping lunch with coworkers and going for long drives instead. More often than not, I'd end up at the lake. I'd park at the edge of the property, far enough away that Evan wouldn't see me if he happened to be there, and just sit, staring at the frozen shoreline. One afternoon, I saw his SUV parked out front. Through the window, I could see Evan's kids running around the living room, laughing. For a second, I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, feeling the heat rise up my neck. Then I forced myself to take a deep breath. None of this was the kids' fault. They were just playing, doing what kids do. But that didn't make it hurt any less. That night, Mom texted me. Family dinner Sunday. Please come. Let's just be together and put this tension behind us. Put this tension behind us. As if all it took was sitting at the same table and pretending like nothing had happened. When Sunday came, I almost didn't go. But some stubborn part of me wanted to see for myself if they would really act like everything was fine. I walked into my parents' house and immediately knew I'd made a mistake. The whole place smelled like roast chicken and garlic, Mom's comfort meal, and everyone was there. Evan and his wife, Lisa, even Grandma. Everyone except me was smiling. Tim, Mom said brightly, like she hadn't spent the past 2 weeks quietly cutting me out of the will. We saved you a seat. I sat down, and for the first 10 minutes, I just listened. Evan was going on about all the projects he had planned for the cabin, knocking down one of the walls to make an open floor plan, putting in a hot tub, maybe even renting it out on weekends when they weren't there. Passive income, he said with a grin. Smart, right? The table erupted in praise. Oh, that's so clever. You've always had a good head for business, Evan. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. Finally, Lisa turned to me. You've been quiet, Tim. What's new with you? I forced a smile. Not much, just staying busy. No one pressed. No one asked if I was okay. No one acknowledged the giant elephant sitting right in the middle of the table. After dinner, I excused myself to the bathroom and just stood there staring at my reflection. My face looked tight, pale, almost unrecognizable. "What are you doing?" I whispered to myself. When I came back out, I overheard Mom talking to Evan in the kitchen. "He'll be fine," she was saying. "Tim's always been independent. He doesn't need as much as the rest of us." Something about those words hit me like a physical blow. He doesn't need as much as the rest of us. I slipped out the front door without saying goodbye. Driving home, I felt something inside me shift. This wasn't just about the cabin anymore. This was about the fact that they had decided who I was and who I wasn't, without ever asking me. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. If I kept waiting for them to see my side of things, I was going to be waiting forever. So, I started making quiet moves. First, I pulled up my shared accounts. Over the years, I'd been helping out my parents financially in little ways, covering the property tax on the cabin when they were short, paying the utilities a few times, even secretly paying for a new water heater 2 winters ago so they wouldn't have to dip into their savings. I stopped all of it. Canceled auto payments, removed myself from anything with my name on it. If they wanted to act like I was just a background character, then fine, they could handle things without me. Then I made another appointment with the lawyer. This time, I didn't just ask questions. I listened very carefully, asked for copies of every document with my name on it, and requested a full accounting of how the estate was currently structured. The lawyer hesitated, clearly aware of the tension in the family, but legally he had to give me the information. When I left his office, I had a manila folder under my arm that suddenly made everything feel real. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. But that calm didn't last long. 2 days before the will reading, I got a group text from Mom. Reminder that the reading is Friday at 2 p.m. Dress nicely. This is an important moment for the family. Important moment for the family. I stared at that message for a long time before typing out a reply, then deleting it. Instead, I started thinking about something the lawyer had said offhandedly during our last meeting. "You know, it's unusual to have a will reading streamed live, but given the number of interested parties, it might be the best way to keep things transparent." At the time, I just nodded. But now the idea didn't seem so crazy. Maybe transparency was exactly what we needed. Something changed in me after I left the lawyer's office with that folder. It wasn't just information. It was proof. Proof that I hadn't been imagining things. Proof that decisions had been made without me. Proof that my anger was justified. It felt like holding the receipts to my own life. Over the next few days, I started to feel lighter in a way I hadn't in weeks. I stopped obsessively checking social media for photos from the cabin. I stopped replaying old conversations in my head. I stopped hoping for apologies that were never going to come. Instead, I started thinking about what I could actually control. The first thing I did was take stock of my finances. I'd always been careful with money, saving more than I spent, investing quietly while everyone else in the family seemed to live in a constant cycle of splurge now, worry later. When I opened up my accounts and saw how much I'd saved, it hit me. I was in a much stronger position than I'd ever realized. That realization gave me confidence. I paid off the last of my student loans, refinanced my car, and even moved a chunk of money into a high-yield account. It sounds boring, but every move I made felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Then, almost on a whim, I decided to make a career change I'd been putting off for years. I'd been working at the same job since my mid-20s, a decent but unfulfilling role where I mostly kept my head down. But 2 weeks earlier, a recruiter had reached out about a position at a tech company in the next city over, a role with better pay, better benefits, and way more room for growth. At first, I'd ignored the message. But now I called the recruiter back. The interview process moved quickly, and by the end of the week, I had an offer in my inbox that was 30% higher than my current salary. I accepted on the spot. Suddenly, things that had felt impossible started to feel within reach. I looked around my apartment, which I'd been treating like a temporary stopgap for years, and decided it was time to find a place that felt more like home. I started touring condos and found one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. I put in an offer. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was building something for myself. It was strange because even as I got busier with my new job and condo search, my family's drama started to feel less suffocating. I still thought about the cabin, of course, but it didn't consume me the way it had before. If anything, it fueled me. Like every step forward was a quiet way of saying, "You don't get to define me." Then came the part that really changed the game. One afternoon, I stopped by the cabin one last time. Partly for closure, partly because I wanted to see it before Evan started tearing down walls and installing hot tubs. As I walked through the place, I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to in years, a small safe tucked into the back of a closet in the master bedroom. It had been there forever, but no one had used it much after my grandfather passed away. I tried the combination, his birthday, and to my surprise, it opened. Inside were old deeds, photographs, and a thick envelope labeled "Instructions for Executor." I sat down on the floor right there and read through it. It was my grandfather's handwriting, outlining what he had originally intended for the property, that it remain a shared space for the entire family, to be preserved and passed down to future generations. I couldn't believe it. My parents had completely gone against his wishes by signing it over to Evan outright. When I showed the documents to the lawyer the next day, he raised his eyebrows. "This doesn't legally override their current decision," he said carefully. "But it does provide strong context for a dispute if you wanted to challenge the transfer." A challenge? For the first time since Thanksgiving, I smiled, not out of spite, but because I realized I had leverage now. I didn't file anything immediately. Instead, I asked the lawyer to hold on to the documents and prepare a formal summary in case we needed to present them. He agreed, saying, "If you want this to be heard, the will reading would be the moment." That night, I sat down at my computer and wrote out everything, every memory of the cabin, every repair I'd done, every contribution I'd made. I included receipts, photographs, even screenshots of texts where Mom had thanked me for paying certain bills. It wasn't about proving I was the better child. It was about proving I'd been there all along, contributing, caring, doing the work no one else wanted to do. By the time I finished, I had a thick digital file that could tell the whole story. When Friday rolled around, I didn't dread the will reading anymore. I actually looked forward to it. As I ironed my shirt that morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror and realized I looked different, sharper, more put together. My eyes didn't have that haunted look they'd had at the family dinner. I was no longer the quiet, passive brother they thought they could push around. When I pulled up to the lawyer's office, Evan's SUV was already there. I saw him through the glass doors, laughing with Mom and Dad like this was some sort of victory lap. But as I walked inside, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the kid they used to talk over at the dinner table. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had the upper hand. And as we all took our seats around the long mahogany table, I caught Mom watching me carefully, maybe sensing something different in my posture. I just smiled, because this time, I was ready for whatever was coming. The will reading was only hours away, but instead of feeling nervous, I felt a calm focus I hadn't experienced in months. It was strange, like all the noise in my head had finally gone quiet. For weeks, I'd been reacting to everything my family threw at me, getting knocked around emotionally like a pinball. But now I was steering the game. Before heading to the lawyer's office, I stopped at a small cafe near my apartment and opened my laptop. I wanted to review the folder I had compiled one last time. Every photo of the dock I'd repaired. Every Home Depot receipt from the countless weekends I'd driven out to fix things. Every invoice I'd paid. I even had screenshots of Mom's texts thanking me for handling repairs when they were on vacation. The more I looked through it, the more powerful it felt, like a record of everything they'd conveniently forgotten. Then I opened the email from the lawyer's office. The live stream link sat there, ready to be shared with anyone who had permission. It wasn't just for immediate family. Technically, anyone named in the will could watch, including distant cousins and even a few family friends who had been left small bequests. That gave me an idea. For most of my life, my parents had controlled the narrative, deciding what was shared with relatives, what stayed private, what stories were told at family gatherings. They always made sure we presented a perfect picture to the outside world, even when things were falling apart behind closed doors. But this time, I wasn't going to let them control how the story was told. I spent the next hour sending quiet, careful messages to certain people: my uncle, who'd always been supportive of me, my grandfather's old fishing buddy, who still called me every Christmas, even a couple of cousins who lived out of state but had grown up coming to the cabin in the summers. I didn't say much, just that the will reading was happening today, here was the link, and that they might want to tune in. When I arrived at the lawyer's office, I was early. The conference room was quiet, the polished wood table gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I took a seat near the end and opened my laptop. The lawyer came in a few minutes later, nodded to me, and said, "Everything is set up. Streaming will begin once everyone is here." One by one, my family trickled in. Evan walked in first, wearing a blazer and grinning like this was some kind of award ceremony. His wife followed, holding a coffee and scrolling through her phone. Mom and Dad arrived together, looking calm but purposeful, like they were about to handle something they considered business. When everyone was seated, the lawyer began with the usual formalities, explaining how the session would work and that it was being streamed to all relevant parties. I caught Mom stiffening slightly at the mention of the stream, but she didn't say anything, not with the camera rolling. As he started reading, I watched their faces carefully. Most of the bequests were small and straightforward: some antique furniture for Lisa, a charitable donation in Grandma's name, a few accounts to be divided evenly. Then he got to the cabin. As per the amended estate plan, he read, "The property located on Lakeshore Road is hereby transferred to Evan Walker, full ownership, free and clear." Evan's grin widened. He sat a little taller in his chair, like he had just been knighted. But I didn't flinch. I simply waited until the lawyer finished the section, then spoke for the first time. "Excuse me," I said evenly, "but I have some additional context I'd like entered into the record." All heads turned toward me. Mom's eyes narrowed. "Tim," she said, her voice sharp, "this isn't the time." With respect, the lawyer interrupted, "Mr. Walker has the right to submit any relevant documents pertaining to the estate." I slid the folder across the table. "This is a record of every repair, every payment, every contribution I've made to the cabin over the past 10 years. It also includes a letter from my late grandfather outlining his original intent for the property to remain a shared family space." The lawyer took the folder, opened it, and his eyebrows went up. "This is substantial." Evan shifted in his chair. "What's your point, Tim?" "My point," I said, keeping my voice calm, "is that decisions were made under the assumption that I was aware and in agreement. I was neither. And now that the entire family is watching this stream, I think they deserve to know how this played out." I saw Mom's face go pale. Dad cleared his throat like he wanted to say something. But the lawyer held up a hand. "Mr. Walker, these documents raise significant questions about intent and contribution. While the transfer is legally binding, this may warrant further review." The room was silent for a moment. The tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. And that's when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my uncle. "Uncle Mark, just watched you speak up. About time someone said it. Call me after. We need to talk." I glanced at the screen and felt a slow, steady satisfaction settle over me. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the easy child, the one they never worried about because they assumed I'd just go along with whatever they decided. But not anymore. I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was rewriting the story. And this was only the beginning. The silence in that conference room stretched on so long that I could hear the faint hum of the streaming equipment. The lawyer shuffled through the pages I provided, nodding to himself while my parents sat there stiff as statues. "This is significant," the lawyer said again, looking up. "While it doesn't invalidate the transfer, it does provide a strong basis for revisiting the terms, particularly given the decedent's written statement about shared ownership." Evan scoffed. "Come on, we've already signed the deed. This is just him being dramatic because he didn't get what he wanted." I didn't take the bait. I just leaned back in my chair and said, "That's one interpretation. Another is that I've been quietly footing bills and putting in sweat equity for a decade, thinking this was a shared family space, only to find out I was left holding the bag while you got the keys." For a moment, Evan actually looked rattled. The lawyer cleared his throat. "I will be making a note in the official record that there is a dispute regarding the intent of this transfer. That means that any future transactions involving the cabin will be subject to review until the matter is resolved. Evan's grin faltered. What does that mean? It means, the lawyer said evenly, you may not be able to proceed with renovations, rentals, or sales until the dispute is settled. I didn't smile, but inside I felt something click into place. That was step one. After the reading, as everyone was filing out, I caught the eye of the streaming camera one last time. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, I said. I think it's important that we all understand how decisions like this affect the family. If you have questions, I'd be happy to share the documents with you. Mom's face turned crimson. She waited until we were in the hallway to hiss, how dare you air this in front of everyone? I met her glare without flinching. How dare you pretend this was fair? I left them standing there and didn't look back. That night, I followed up on my uncle's text. When he picked up, his voice was warm and steady. Tim, I'm proud of you for speaking up. Your grandfather would have wanted you to. He hated the idea of that place being turned into a private retreat. We talked for almost an hour. By the end of the call, he offered to back me if I wanted to formally challenge the transfer. I can testify about what your grandfather told me, he said, and I've got photos from all those summers you and I were the only ones up there fixing things. This family's memory is selective, but mine isn't. I thanked him, and when we hung up, I felt something new. Momentum. Over the next week, I gathered everything, the lawyer's notes, my uncle's statement, and even a few old emails from my grandfather that I found in an ancient inbox. Then I drafted a formal letter to my parents and Evan outlining my intent to contest the transfer and requesting a mediation session before anything further was done with the cabin. When I sent it, I expected a fight, but what I got was silence. Days passed, then a week. Finally, Mom called. Tim, she said, her voice unusually soft. Is this really what you want? To drag the family through a legal battle? What I want, I said calmly, is for this to be handled the way Granddad intended. If that means mediation, so be it. If that means court, so be it. But I won't be erased. She sighed heavily. You're not being erased. Yes, I said quietly. I was. That was the last time we spoke before the mediation session. On the day of the meeting, I walked into the neutral conference room in my new suit. A little detail, but one that made me feel stronger, like I was stepping into this as a man in control, not the kid they used to dismiss. Evan was already there, looking irritated, tapping his foot like this was an inconvenience. My parents sat side by side, looking tired. The mediator began by asking everyone to state their position. Evan jumped in first, insisting that the transfer was final and that I was just upset about losing my favorite vacation spot. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I laid out every fact in clear, measured language. The payments I'd made, the repairs I'd done, the letter from my grandfather, the photographs. Then I handed over my uncle's sworn statement. This isn't about money, I said finally. It's about respect. I want the cabin to be treated as what it was meant to be, a shared family space. If that means we create a formal trust to manage it, fine. If it means we sell it and split the proceeds equally, fine. But I won't stand by while it becomes one person's private asset, bought with my time and labor. The room was silent. The mediator nodded. That's a very reasonable position. Evan, do you have a response? For once, Evan didn't have a clever comeback. He glanced at Mom, then at Dad, but they both avoided his gaze. I guess we could talk about a trust, he muttered finally. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first time he'd budged. The session ended with the mediator agreeing to draft a proposal for shared management of the cabin, including a clause that no major renovations or sales could be done without unanimous consent. When I walked out of that room, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, but because for the first time in my life, I'd stood my ground and made them take me seriously. The mediation agreement was signed 2 weeks later. It was surprisingly formal. Pages of legal language spelling out how the cabin would now be managed through a family trust, how expenses would be shared, how no single person could rent it, renovate it, or sell it without the unanimous written consent of every beneficiary. When the document arrived in my inbox, I read through it 3 times just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like my grandfather's original wish to keep the cabin as a family gathering place had been honored. Of course, not everyone was happy. Evan was furious. He called me the day after the trust went into effect, his voice sharp with barely contained anger. "You had to make this complicated, didn't you?" he snapped. "You couldn't just let us have it." I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch before answering. "You already had it, Evan. You just didn't want to admit you took it the wrong way." He scoffed. "This means every time I want to do something up there, I have to get your permission. Do you realize how petty that is?" I stayed calm. "I think it's called accountability. And besides, you don't have to get my permission. You just have to get my agreement. Big difference." He hung up on me. A few days later, Mom called. Her voice was quieter than usual, softer. "You really embarrassed us with that live stream," she said. "No," I corrected gently. "I held you accountable. There's a difference." She didn't argue. Over the next few months, I saw the ripple effects of what had happened. Evan stopped posting triumphant photos of the cabin online. Probably because every time he did, cousins would comment things like, "Glad to see Tim's work is still holding up," or, "Hope you guys are keeping the place nice for everyone." Lisa surprisingly reached out one afternoon. She asked if I wanted to go up to the cabin with her for a weekend, just the two of us. When we got there, she admitted quietly, "I think I was on the wrong side of this. I didn't realize how much you'd done for this place. It was easier to just go along with Mom and Dad." We sat on the porch drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over the lake. And for the first time, I felt like maybe the cabin could go back to being what it used to be, a place for all of us, not just a prize someone had won. By spring, something else had shifted. My relationship with my parents was no longer the same, and maybe it never would be, but they treated me differently now, with a kind of weary respect. Dad even called me one day to ask if I'd look over a contractor's estimate before he approved work on the old house. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. And me? I thrived. My new job was challenging, but exciting. My new condo felt like mine in a way no place ever had. And I had even started seeing someone, a woman I'd met through work who shared my love of quiet lake mornings. The first time I brought her to the cabin, I felt a strange kind of pride unlocking the door. Not because I'd won, but because I'd fought for my place and kept something that mattered deeply to me from being stolen out from under me. Evan happened to show up that same weekend. For a second, I thought there would be tension, but instead, he just nodded at me across the porch. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He didn't say much else, but that was fine. The message was clear enough. The days of him making smug decisions behind my back were over. Later that evening, I built a fire in the old stone fireplace. My girlfriend sat next to me on the couch, the room lit only by the flicker of the flames. "You really love this place," she said softly. I smiled, staring into the fire. "Yeah, and for a while, I thought I'd lost it forever." I thought about everything that had happened, the laughter at Thanksgiving, the backroom deal, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the mediation, the live stream. And then I thought about where I was now, sitting in the cabin I'd fought to keep, finally at peace. I tossed another log on the fire and said, almost to myself, some things are worth fighting for, even if you have to fight your own family to keep them. The flames crackled. The lake was still. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like the quiet one anymore. I felt like the one who finally got heard. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more crazy Reddit tales, and ring the bell so you never miss the next one. And hey, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you would have done in this situation.